Upskilling and uptraining has been all the rage in the HR world, but do you actually know what skills are transferable when you're looking at a resume? Today, Julie Schweber and I will be covering just that on how to find hidden talent by recruiting through these adjacent skills. Let's get right into it. I want to point to this next slide that we have here on tips to identify adjacent skills. So talking a little bit about reviewing resumes to identify candidates' core competencies, closely examine job descriptions and requirements to identify those adjacent skills to begin with, probe candidates to explore their experience beyond their primary expertise. I also think a side tangent from this one is, probe existing employees to see if they have any referrals here, right? As we talked earlier.
Yeah, right.
Another one, talking about leverage your professional network. Obviously, this is a big one. Leveraging those connections is huge. Julie, my question for you is, in the context of shift industries, how can HR identify these adjacent skills that may not be directly aligned with traditional job requirements?
Yeah, that's a wonderful question too. And I think we're going to have to get some input from those frontline supervisors because they know these roles inside and out, and they are working with these folks day in and day out. So they may be able to identify and figure out some of these adjacent skills, I think. And we're talking about not only from candidates, but even employees when we want to move them or they are interested in moving to another role. So what can employers do? Some may even have, like I mentioned, their supervisors identify employees or the candidates that they've interviewed. That happens a lot. We interview somebody for something else, but then we realize, oh my gosh, he's got all the skill set for this role. Okay. But keeping those, don't let them just go to the bottom of the pile. Make sure we act on those. Professional development strategies, letting folks know what skills we need now and in the future, and what those folks can do to get those skill sets. A lot of companies might have a mentoring or like an internal program, leap or whatever it might be called, something like that, where we are letting folks progress with assignments, projects, temporary space fillers while they are gaining new skills. Sometimes it's a half a day here, a half a day there. Some companies might be able to allow it for a week, some for 2 or 3 months, but it's not always realistic to have it that long, where they're jumping in and learning a little bit about other roles and seeing if their skill set and their interest are aligned with that.
Do you have any examples of, adjacent skills that can actually be valuable within shift-based industries?
I guess, in looking for this webinar, I mean, so many industries are shift-based, from healthcare to retail to law enforcement, packaging, transportation, restaurants, manufacturing, trucking. So it was hard to, all of those may require different skill sets. And here's what I'll say. Hire an attitude, okay? Not a specific skill set or a degree, but we hire for an attitude, and most of that's going to apply to any position. Someone with initiative, someone who's going to take accountability and own that particular task, someone that is, humble. But they're willing to learn. They're hungry to learn. Yeah. They can also work well as a team, and they've got great communication skills. Now, can you think of any job where that wouldn't apply?
So true.
Right?
Someone who's a little scrappy, someone who can adapt.
Scrappy, that's the word. That's exactly right.
Absolutely.
That's always been my, never hire a degree, hire an attitude, right? Because you've got two candidates. One is the Ivy League educated and never worked a day in his life versus someone, the first in the family to go to college. They paid for it themselves. They had a waitress, 4 summers in a row, and boy, did they learn about customer experience.
Absolutely.
Who's hungrier? Okay. Yeah. Who may work a little harder because they have something to prove. So that's probably what I would say.
I love that. I love that. That is so great. how can HR create, cross-training programs to allow employees to actually develop and, showcase some adjacent skills
Mhm.
possibly, and of course, in turn expand the talent base within the
Mhm.
company?
Yeah. And speaking of cross train, I didn't use that word just a couple of minutes ago, but that's basically what it is. It doesn't
Yeah.
career progression doesn't always have to be vertical. It can be
Mhm.
horizontal. It can be diagonal. Sometimes it's even, you know, downward vertical, depending upon the situation. But as long as an employee is always learning. So you want to have that culture, that strategy to say, hey, we want folks to stay here. You may not stay in our department forever or do this
Mhm.
role forever, and that's okay. We list our opportunities for all employees. Everybody can throw their hat in the ring if they're interested. We also have some, you know, weekly, monthly, quarterly cross training. If you're
Mhm.
interested in a particular department, fill out, or send an email or, you know, fill out the cross training form on our
Yeah.
on site portal, whatever that may be. And it may be interesting to talk with employees first to see what makes sense. Talk with your key stakeholders, managers, frontline supervisors to find out what where we can grow employees
Mhm.
and how long we can bring them over here while they decide, hey, if this is something they may be interested in. Some of these shift industries may have slow periods in the restaurant industry, you know, 2 to 4, 2 to 5 before the next dinner rush. So trying to identify what's going to work best for that business, but then
Yeah.
having a formal program.
Absolutely. I love what you had to say about talking with other teams, with your frontline managers, and collaborating with them. We actually have this feature called the Skills Matrix, and it allows a really
Yes.
visual aspect for HR and managers to really break down the strengths and weaknesses of each employee. And they can kind of see, hey, we actually need somebody to come in and do some more of the heavy lifting here, or we need somebody to be upskilled in this sense because we're obviously really lacking over here. And it really helps narrow down into what really needs to be recruited or what really needs to be upskilled, uptrained, cross-trained, whatever it might be there.
Right.
So that skills matrix is a perfect kind of visual for the collaboration between HR and managers and making sure, hey, we're working together to figure out what needs to happen in the company for obviously long-term success.
I love that skills matrix.
Yeah.
Perfect.
It's
Perfect.
very cool. It's new. It's awesome. Check it
Uh-huh.
out. But it's very, very interesting to kind of see that breakdown in real time.
Yeah.
And it's a perfect visual for that collaboration aspect.
Wonderful.
Awesome. Are there any specific strategies to identify candidates who can adapt and acquire new skills? That attitude aspect that you mentioned. Do you look for anything there when you're talking or interviewing a candidate?
Sure. And, and some of that you're going to think of these types of questions, in advance, that behavioral
Mhm.
interviewing. Hey, can you give me an example
Sure.
or tell me what your worst mistake was at work? I love that question.
Yeah.
But that gives you a sense of who that person is. Did they take ownership or were they blaming others? Did they share what they did to fix it and maybe what they learned from that mistake? So that
Mhm.
tells us a lot. But having some key consistent interview questions that you're going to ask about, your biggest mistake, or tell me about a time when you were working with someone who wasn't a team player, and how did you handle that conflict? So
Mhm.
asking those questions in the interview rather than tell me about, we usually start out with tell me about yourself, but kind of getting specific examples.
Yeah.
Okay, because they have to think about that, and we want a real example, and you can't really make that stuff up because it's from their specific background. So I think that can be helpful.
Definitely. Are there any success stories or kind of case studies you can share where organizations have successfully upskilled employees based on adjacent skills that they've sought out?
Yeah. I've seen it in a couple of the Fortune 500s that I worked at.
Sure.
And the biggest success story I can tell you is a person came in and he started by delivering packages and he
Yeah.
rose to COO. Okay. I don't think it
Wow.
gets much
Wow.
more successful than that. But that was part of the culture. We're here everybody comes in, we're all on a, equal footing, and that opportunity is there, working hard, and they could see that. And I would say 90% of the supervisors started out as couriers delivering packages. Okay, so that's another successful story to say that they had skill sets. Obviously, there was some training involved so they can get from point A to point B.
I love that. I love to end with this last question here. I asked all my guests this. What are 1 or 2 top tips, actions, or takeaways that our audience can leave with, in this case, to better make recruitment less painful coming into 2024?
Good one. Great question. Define your employee value proposition if you haven't. Okay. Know what it is. Share it with applicants, but also with employees. My second one is create a positive candidate experience. It will come back to haunt you if you don't, on social media and your referrals and your applicant flow. And then my last one is, following up with all candidates, even if they're not selected. Treat them with respect, show them that you appreciate their time and their presence with applying.
Thank you so much for watching that segment from our webinar on how to make recruitment less painful for HR. If you'd like to watch the full webinar, click this video here and be sure to subscribe for more content like this.